Last week, we got a new quick demo of notifications. We saw some PRs, and today demos maybe. Fix the thing. So status. Didn't mention anything in option one. Should go like this. Here, fix FlowPart widgets are not indexed in Lucene. So the change is based on the PR, the same as how to index that part, which is iterate over every part in the FlowPart, every widget, and then call the same build index async but on each of them with a different key. So that's the idea. Migrate the OpenID module to OpenIddict 4. So Kevin put OpenIddict 4 and updated Orchard core. It is nice. Okay. Breaking changes. In OpenIddict, not in Orchard so far. This could be a breaking change, but we won't take it as such. But the idea is that when we change the argument name, if someone wrote some code with the argument name, which is optional, then you're breaking it. That's okay. Okay, cool. Thanks, Kevin. Remove extra semicolon. Yeah, I've seen a bunch of them. You see. So we could go further. This one is not an issue, feature, but these ones, they could be fixed. Well, 987. Okay, remove unused StubHttpContextAccessor. Okay. Just for test, and it's not used. Yeah. NullLoggerFactory instead of StubLoggerFactory. Oh, we have, okay, well, we already have a NullLoggerFactory. Okay, remove necessary TestStreamHelpers. Good thing with that kind of PRs is that they're not necessary, but I assume when we start looking at these, it means there is not much more to do than just trying to find what's not used. PdfPig. We haven't heard of this one in a long time. So this is to extract PDF text, I believe, for indexing PDF files. Change MappingsViewModel class to public. 596, why is that? Oh, different window. 986. Well, my question is, what is the reason to make it public? It's a module. Oh, yeah. So now I get it. And now I get the page rewriting. I'm like, what does it mean, page rewriting? Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's a module, but it's used in a view. So if you want to customize the view, you need the view model, or you won't be able to customize the view in your own themes. That's the idea. Okay, get it. Not that clever. I should have got it. Okay, good. That's it for status. Questions, comments?
There's an old PR if you want to get some traction on it. You have the time.
I don't like old PRs. Oh, we have tenant ID. Okay, which one is that?
Oh, 12420. So there's an issue where if you disable role features right now, it breaks the entire site and you can't fix it. So obviously it's bad. So that kind of fixes it, but I'm not sure if that's the approach you want to take or whatnot. So
what did we review recently related to that? You did some changes that when a feature was disabled, it would break the site. Was it users?
If you disable roles, it will break.
Yeah, that's this PR, but we talked about
Yes.
a different PR and we did some changes.
There's another one for like permissions around users. We accepted one recently that did some sort of cleanup by moving services to like extension. I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
Okay, so prevent users features from breaking and roles features developed. Yeah, the issue. User active operator roles module. Okay. That doesn't sound terrible. Okay, that's what you said. Exactly. I said you said it, and you say, okay, you understand. Okay. Mirage, and just a discussion. Okay. Okay. That's okay. Confirming. Okay. So far, Mike, myself, Mirage, and Jean-Thierry agree on a solution. Wow. So what is the PR doing? Actually, I commented on that already. Whole store. Okay, that's the same thing. What is that? So holes. Okay, that's just reorganizing. Good. Emissions. Same thing, I believe. Okay. That's just cosmetics, null role store. Okay, that's fine to be there. It's like this way it doesn't depend on that. I don't care. Startup default implementation. So where is that used? Let's see here. No role user store.
So this would be the default store. And then if we enable the roles and the module at the same time, we change the store with a new store.
I role store, I role. User store. Okay, there is a user store and the role store. Okay. The role user store. Okay. That's weird. Cool. Role base user store. Why do you need two implementations?
Because I think this the user store, the default user store requires iRole service. So this way we can provide a role service of, so we don't make changes to the original file, I think. It's been a while.
I thought that just changing the whole store or the whole service would be sufficient. This way, whatever required roles will get, oh, there is no role. That's why I'm wondering why is that thing. You see that is iRole service. So maybe we need a role service that also does nothing, because this one requires a role service. This one doesn't require a role service. But why not just resolve the role service? But this will return nothing. But this is not the same thing, but okay. User store. So this implements user store. But the get claims async here. Doesn't use roles. I'd like to see how it's using roles. And role-based user store. Okay, and this one, it's from user store that has add to role async and remove from role async. Oh, this is user store. Okay, this is the base class. So what does the base class look like? Okay, not related. Not related. Not related. Here. Role names. Role service get roles by name. Okay. Person default, if there is one. So if this thing returns nothing, then we don't need to change this code. First, get role names.
Yeah, and I think that's why we have a default. Yeah, that's exactly why we have two different stores, one with no role, which basically returns an empty array.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly, I think, why.
But do you agree that we don't change?
Not sure why the change happened there. What does it do? It's like I'm guessing it's the same logic in that new method that was added, the add to role async.
Yeah, because here you make a virtual method called add to role, such that a subclass can do that and say do something or do nothing. What I'm saying is that don't add anything. There is already an indirection here with role service. So
yeah,
if
yeah,
that
maybe.
thing,
yeah,
so
I see what you're saying. I'm not sure if we.
Okay, so we need.
I think it was a change before because there was a lot of changes that happened. So I think this was done at some point, but I think it's no longer needed. I think I have to double check.
So the same way you have a role store that does nothing. Okay. And honestly, probably the role service is using the role store. So if you ask the role service, gives me the roles, because there is the full role store, it will return nothing. So, but maybe the default implementation is in another. Okay.
I think there might be another something derived from the user store that implement that function. I'm guessing that's why that is there. Hang on. Like the user, no user store. That one, yeah, that one overrides. So if you look at the no user store, no roles user store, no roles user store. Yeah. So I think that one implements or derived from that class and overrides that method.
Yeah, and I think you don't need these two.
You know, I think the problem, I could be wrong. If I recall correctly, the problem is if you take out roles, somehow you still need the super admin. You need to give them all permissions.
Okay.
I think that's what that is doing. So it's looking at the current user. If that is a super user, then we basically grab all the permissions and we give it to them. Because at that point, that we can't, you know, we can't grant permissions at the default level.
Okay, but that can be based on default implementations that are replaced when the module is enabled. Because the roles module will allow to map permissions to roles. And if there is no such thing, then the default implementation that you register with the user module just returns, yeah, you can do everything. There is no role, so yes, do everything.
Yeah, I think that there's also another class called role-based user store, and that actually overrides the add to role async method, which is the new one that was added.
Yes,
role-based, yeah.
That's why I think you don't need that, because okay, this is the code from before. The code that you removed from there, it's that class. So where I commented here, this is user store. Okay, the base class. This is what was there before. You just created two new ones. So in this user store, you removed this code. This code in the add to role, a user said, give me the role, all the roles. Okay. And it's adding every role to the user. Okay, because here, so there must be some more things here. Where is that? Add to role, user normalize. So you say, here is a user, add this role to the user, or add the user to the role. And the method says, hey, role service, give me all the names of the roles. And the first one that matches the normalized role name, add it to the user. Okay. If this, so, and you remove this part of the code, you made it dynamic, like, okay, let's, and I think actually that's, yeah. See, add to role async, add to role async. That's a null user, but you created one with user. So this can be overridden. That's actually not necessary. You could just override, but this one is not virtual. Okay, so this one is not virtual, so made a virtual one, so you can change the behavior of that. And then there is one that is the previous implementation that does the same thing, matches at the normalized one, and then, so that's the one when the module is there. And when there is no role, you say, there is no implementation. Your store. You don't implement it. Okay, it's virtual, so you don't implement it, so it won't do anything. So what I'm saying is that you don't need these two things, or maybe you need that. Maybe you need for that get claims async. Let's see. You also have get claims async. So if I go back there, you must have changed get claims async. Here, you changed it. Same thing. You remove the code and you say delegate it to get claims async with a user, not an iUser, but a user. And here, what you can do So that's probably for the permissions for the superadmin. It claims A6. So why would this code here not work when there is no role module? User claims. So maybe this thing is set by something else. But I don't think you should change that. So if we go there, get claims async, this is not changed, but this one, that's the default one. You say when there is no role module enabled. Okay, so probably this logic is in the roles module right now. And because it's not enabled, then this logic is not executed automatically on the user. So what is that? Permission provider. So I'm pretty sure that wherever you pick this code from in the roles module, this should be in a default implementation somewhere. The same way as it is in the roles module right now, there should be one implementation in the users module that is invoked the same way, not using that logic here. Or you can also handle that. No, you don't know that the roles module is not there, so you can't do that. But here it's just for the super user. Interesting. And you are doing it every time. So I think that that's not the way to do that. So let's see.
I think the idea for that is that if you're logged in as a super admin, we have to give you everything so you can control your site. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that the code here, I know what it's doing. The code here, you copy pasted it from the roles module, from some component of the roles module. Because when you don't have the roles module that is doing that, you don't have that, so you don't have the super admin behavior. So you copy pasted it and put it in a custom implementation of the no role user store. Because you know that the no role user store is only there when there is no roles module. So you need to call the same code from the roles module when you don't have the roles module. That's what I'm saying, you copy pasted it from somewhere. And to be able to execute that, when the user is loaded, you changed user store to add the get claims with not iUser but user, which makes it possible to override it in a custom store, and you set it on the custom store. What I'm saying is that I'm trying to find a solution where you don't need custom implementations of no role user store and a role-based user store. Just don't change that either by having the same component that is currently in the roles module that contains this code here. So that's why I'm trying to look right now for this component that contains this code. So it must be in the roles module. It's using super user. Things, roles, security, super user, manage users by role security event handler. So we have one. Let's look at this one. High authorization service event handler. See, that's something like this. So the idea being that if you have a custom high authorization service event handler, or maybe you can't because this will always be called and you don't know that the whole you see iRole service here. This is the thing I said that needs to be changed by default. So the whole service here
You know, maybe we can implement the iClaims provider, and if you are a super admin, you know, we just load all your claims, and then if we do that, then you're right, we don't have to have multiple user stores, and then we just know, hey, you're a super admin, and we load that service. But I think whenever we register the roles, we have to remove that service.
Or replace it. But yeah, but there are some services that you can't remove or replace. Like if you had a singleton, fine, you can replace it. If you had an enumerable of singleton, of services, then which one do you remove? You can replace one, but so that's why I'm saying here, the I authorization event handler, it's hard to say, oh, the roles is enabled, so let's replace the one from users. No, because you're just adding one.
No, I mean, so we have an interface called iUserClaims provider.
Yes,
and so that one
is the provider pattern is a list of providers. That's what I'm describing.
Right. Yeah, I get that. But what we can do is we can remove a specific implementation.
But you have to know it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we know it.
But then the roles module needs to know the users module and the class and everything. So it's now you're introducing the opposite thing, like you can't have a different users module. No, but well, your solution works, so that's one solution. Just checking if maybe there is no other way to do that because of that thing. There might be performance issues though here, because we are reloading all the permissions every time we call get claims async. Before it was in the user store, in the user object. I don't know, maybe we are also creating it all the time. I don't know. That's something to look into. Maybe it was slow before, it will still be slow. Settings, permissions, administrator. Interesting, get claims is, yeah. It's kind of sad because we list all the claims. So we assign all the permissions. And then we check for any permission instead of saying whatever the permission is, I don't need to know them, just grant them. But here we still, maybe we don't need to do that. Yeah, maybe we need because we don't know. One day maybe we still need the permissions, not just grant it. There's so much cache to do here. Oh, site service permission provider. Any patent claims, a new one. Okay. That's weird.
Yeah, we can replace line 41 with get required services, and no need for that check on 44. Yeah.
That's why. Okay. Yeah, and it could be empty also, but maybe that's okay. That's not an issue. Permission providers give all the permissions. This one at least should be cached because we are saying all the permissions provided for the case where it can even be cached by role.
I mean, at the very minimum here, what we could do is cache the claims collection per request. Well, yeah, but the service is registered per request, right? So we could, this service, we could just at least the claims collection, we can write it to a private variable. And if it exists, we can just always return it. Otherwise,
no, I'm sure we are just calling it once per request, but I also think that we could cache it for more than one request and invalidate it when there is a new provider, which means when the tenant has restarted, which means it's automatically refreshed, or when there is a change on roles, then we can say refresh cache, so have some invalidation. But here,
yeah.
Okay.
I see what you're saying.
Claims, I think it was in user claims. Interesting. It was already populated.
Yeah, but it was populated from the roles, and if the roles aren't used, we just have to manually populate it.
Mm-hmm. What it's something else is sitting. Must be populated by one of these services here. And then it's on the user, and then we can read them. So I'm sure you can have a, yeah. We'll add a comment there also. Also, I don't really agree with that, this administrator role in this case. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, I see what you're doing. Interesting. So you assume that if there is no roles module, you say any user is like the administrator user. But you still rely on the permission provider to give the administrator permissions. It could also be that so just assign all the permissions. That's one way to do that.
Yeah, but I think we group permissions by role name. So that's the only way we can get the grouped ones.
Okay.
So administrator is the one that has all the permissions. So I think that's why.
I don't agree. I don't believe you. Let me think. Yeah, no, I don't agree. There is for each permission provider, there is a way to get all permissions, not just by role. Pretty sure of that.
Oh, so permission provider, you get all permissions. Yeah, there's one that gives you all permissions. The other one gives you a stereotype of permissions.
So the get all permissions is the one that returns the list of all the permissions. So you don't need to say administrator. You say, give me all the permissions of anything, and this user has all the permissions. So it's one way.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I can change that. Yeah. Yep. It's called Git permissions. There's Git permissions and Git stereotypes. So we're not, instead of targeting stereotypes, we can just target Git permissions. Agreed.
Another option is to find or to create a handler that will allow any permission, because what you realize is that you did a change, you did your changes here, but you didn't have this code. And you realize that the user that you are logged with didn't have any permission. Okay, then you find this, you search for a solution to give all the permissions to the current user. And your solution was to create this thing. I think a better solution would have been to just create a custom handler that says an authorization handler. Authorization handler that will return true all the time, like, yeah, yes, I grant it to you. And claims will be empty because this code here will not return anything. That was your issue. The claims were empty, so you try to fill it up. I'm saying, no, it's okay if it's empty. Just grant it, even if claims is empty and it doesn't have permission. This way you don't need this code. And this handler will just check that if the implementation of role store, for instance, if the implementation, you resolve role store, and in this same users module for the authorization handler, and if the role store is the null role store, you just grant the claim, because you know that there is nothing to fill up the claims of the user. So it's not there is no roles module. So you can just say, okay, there is no roles module, so I will grant the claim. That will work. And then you don't need to change that. And all of this will, you won't need this class, you won't need this class, and you won't need this class.
But I think, I mean, doing it this way, I think it'll be costly because authorization handler is called multiple times, whereas when we log in, we call that one time to store permissions in your claims, and we don't need to keep calling or checking the store type.
I don't agree, because the authorization, I would even disagree completely, because the authorization handler will be just return true, which will always be faster than anything that looks into a list containing tens of permissions to find the permission is there.
Well, I mean, don't we have to? Because we only want to do this behavior for the super user, not for every user.
Yes, that's okay here. You can do that here. In the authorization handler, you can say, oh, wait. No, wait. If you don't have roles, what kind of user is not a super user?
No one.
Everyone is a super user. We agree. Then you just return true in the authorization handler. That's what I did. So return true instead of user is your claim true, and I know that all your claims, that you have all the claims. All the permissions.
So are you saying if we disable the role user, then everybody gets permission to everything?
If you disable the role user, what, the role module, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, if we go by it this way,
yes,
then you're saying you don't need to check what kind of user is logged in. You're just going to return true, like, yes, hey, you're valid.
Yes,
so that means anyone that can log into the site all of a sudden becomes a super user.
Well,
with all permissions.
Sure. What do you expect? What do you expect the site to do when there is no roles feature?
I expect to only, for safety, to give the admin, the super user, permission to everything and no one else, because if you are disabling the roles feature,
okay,
you know, we don't give you anything that allow you to do anything with permissions. So either you come up with your own implementation for whatever it is the reason. Okay.
If you have your own implementation, then there is a roles module, so this code won't be executed. That's fine. But if you have no roles feature enabled, this behavior will be executed because the null role store will be there, right? If there is any role feature, the default one or the custom ones, this won't apply, so we are safe. Now, this needs to be discussed. Like if there is no roles feature, any of them, not even a custom one, that's the behavior that is applied here. What I said is that let's everyone be super user. And you say, let's just the one that is called super user be super users. But what will the other ones be able to do? They don't even have a view permission.
Yeah, nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. But so I think that's safer, right?
Sure, that's an option to say. That could even be like a setting of this authorization under what do you authorize users to do, but that's weird. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just the way how I think. I mean, if you accident or not accidentally, if you purposely disabled the roles service,
I see what you mean.
You know, you have to come up with something else.
Okay,
like
okay.
Otherwise, I mean, doesn't make sense. But if we're giving the user the option to disable it, at least we need to protect the outcome.
Okay. But that doesn't change that this is this high authorization under. Any permission.
I mean, I'm not saying we can't use author. I think it makes sense to use the authorization handler, but at that point, every single request, we are calling the settings to check the super user and checking if the super user, the user is a current user.
That's like so much faster than what's done today. Today, the get claims async is still called
one time when you log in.
It's called one time when you log in.
Yeah, and then we store that into your session.
In the cookie, it's even like
And then it's a lot quicker than having to fetch the database every single time.
Sure, but well, it's still sent on the network. Now it will be empty, so there is no network thing. And you still have to do a lookup, right, in memory for the thing. The site settings, the super username is also cached in memory. So there is no, you will get the thing from the memory, the super username.
Right.
Then you're like, if super user equals admin, or if user equals admin, return true. Otherwise, return false. I mean, that's not the perf issue. And that's such a niche thing that, like, who cares? Even if it's a little slower, it's not slow. It's slower than a scan. Sure, it's not slow. If it's slower than a scan, which I'm not super sure with that. So perf here is not an issue.
So I think even if we go this route and adding the authorization handler, that would only be registered only if the user, if the role module is not enabled, right?
No. It will be always registered because you can't know that the roles is not, that any role feature is not enabled. So what I'm suggesting here in the comment is this authorization handler resolves the role store. Okay? Because there is no custom role feature, this role store implementation is the null role store from the same module. So what you are doing in this authorization handler, when you resolve role store, you check if the service I resolved is null role store, then, oh, we don't have a roles feature. So we need to say that the super user has all the permission.
So you want to check, know, the implementation every single time?
Yes.
Okay.
it's one of the many authorization handlers when the site is correctly set up. And it's just a 1 DI resolution and checking the type. So that's the cheapest we can do. The other way around, what I assume you describe is any roles feature, we need to tell the user feature, hey, remove this implementation. And I'm like, that's an even worse dependency because you need to know the class and the roles module now works with a very specific users module. So you could not say tomorrow that I want a different users module. The same way you want to say here, I want a different role store module or no role store module. So I think this is better here.
Now that makes sense. So to make sure I understand correctly, so this code that you have on the right will end up moving it into the authorization handler. We have to add a check to only execute it only if you're using the no role store. And then really we will no longer need the role-based user store, and we will no longer need the no role store. So we are removing
this code on the right. You don't you remove it like this file removed, this file removed, this change removed. Use the same user store as before. Everything here is disabled.
Yeah. I think I follow you. That's good.
That also makes sample websites easier when you don't have the roles module, because you can say, you can create a site and then have users and everything and not care with permissions and roles and everything if you don't care.
I mean, just another thought. Well, can't we, instead of using a handler, can't we just implement the iUser permission provider and then do the same thing, inject the user store, and then check for the implementation? And if it is a null, we check the user base and just add the claims and everything falls into place. Same thing, but instead of using basically using a different handler, instead of using the iPermission handler, which is evaluated every single time. In this case, we only evaluate it when you log in, using the same logic as you're mentioning.
The iPermission provider?
Yeah, iUser claims provider. I believe iUser. Let me see. The file name iClaims provider, but the class name iUser claims provider. So that's called as soon as you're logged in. So it's called once. I think it makes more sense this way to me, but using the same exact logic as what you described.
No, when there is no roles, there is no permissions to list. That seems weird. When you're trying to get perf, and I will agree when I see that it's slower or faster, one or the other. If you can't prove that there is a significant change, you should not care about it. It's not an obvious one.
Okay, but what's the downside from using user claims provider in this case? It's the same. It's a handler.
So what's the and then you will assign all the. Okay, and you sign the claims for everything. Fine. Just for the super user, you assign all the claims. That's it.
Right.
Okay. Same thing. Okay, good.
Yeah, I'll make those changes and then I'll ping you again, and we'll have you review it.
But there will still be an authorization handler that will do the check. So
correct, which whatever we already have today. So that won't change. We just logged you in with all available permissions. And then the handlers that we have today will still do their thing.
user claims provider. That's the one you say. What's the name of the file that implements that? Check user claims provider.
I believe there's multiple implementation.
What?
I have to look it up here and see if I can.
User profile claims provider. But it's in a demo.
Now there's an email claims provider. That's a file. It's called email claims provider. That one inject the email and the email verified into the claims. There's a user profile claims provider. That's an internal class.
Yeah, it's a demo feature.
That's a demo feature, correct. I think there's only two.
So the permissions, they don't come from that then. They are, I'm sure, in the logic that uses a user claims provider, but they are not provided as a user claims provider. Whatever is resolving that, like the default user claims principal provider factory, probably it will resolve that, but it doesn't use that to. There's a base user claims principal factory.
Yeah, see, it just grabs all the claims from all the services and returns it to the.
Yes, but we don't have the implementation that does it for the permissions. Infrastructure security, default permissions granting service. Maybe that's that. That's probably this one. That's it. Authorization window. Well, you see. But we agree on the outcome. How it's done, so. Okay with that. So let's look at this PR. Match it when you think it is ready. Tenant ID. All good. All good. Oh, generate a new one. On your comment on this one. Any other questions, topics?
There's one question in one of the PRs, a PR that you already approved, but I think we're making a slight change. I think John Theory is asking you a question. It is the, hang on, let me find it. It is 12950. Scroll all the way down to last comment from John Theory. You can go all the way to like the last two lines and you'll see the question.
So what's the issue? That's the goal of this feature, no?
So right now, if an admin, so an admin can disable the feature for you, okay, and can enable it for you, right? But if it's enabled, you cannot disable it, right? Because if you disable it now, you can't really get back to it. But the tenant admin can still enable it and disable it for you. So if you're a default tenant, you can toggle it. If you're an other tenant, if it's there, you can't disable it. But if it's not there, you can't also access it.
Make features module optional to non-default tenant. Okay. Can't be disabled. Will not be. Is always can't be disabled once enabled. Okay. Okay, so now we can disable. Fine.
So basically right now, if you're an other tenant it still behaves like it's always enabled if it is truly enabled. But as a host, as a default tenant, you can still enable it and disable it if you wish for the other tenant. But as an other tenant, you can't disable it. You can't disable your own feature, basically.
That's weird. I don't like when something happens for a specific feature, or because it's the features feature, then once it's enabled, you can't disable it. Oh, because it's enabled by the default tenant, you can't disable it. That might be something like if the default tenant enabled it, you can't disable it. You have to ask the default tenant to disable it.
Correct. That's exactly how it is.
But why for the features and not the other ones? Like the default tenant enabled users, why? And how do you know it's a default tenant? Because maybe it's from the recipe, and then sure it was enabled from a recipe, but nah, I don't know. So this thing here, if the default tenant enabled it for the tenant, they won't be able to accidentally disable it. I'm like, let them accidentally disable it. If they can disable another feature accidentally, I mean, disable the features accidentally, fine, accidents happen.
Well, if you do accident, that's the thing, you cannot get it back, right? I think that's the issue.
Yeah, but
unless you ask for the default admin, say, hey, I screwed up, can you enable it for me?
Sure. If people are not allowed to enable this feature. Oh, so the features feature can only be enabled by default today?
Correct. Well, today it's always enabled, right? So we're changing that, so it's not always enabled. So if your recipe enabled it, okay, then you can't disable it. But if you're the host admin and you choose, you can go and disable it for that tenant. At the same time, you can also enable it for that tenant. But the tenant themselves cannot disable the features feature. They cannot enable the feature, obviously. If it's not there, they can't enable.
So if a tenant can't enable the feature, then they shouldn't be allowed to disable it either.
Yeah, which is this case exactly what it is. So you can't enable it, you can't disable it.
Okay, but if a tenant can enable a feature, they can disable it.
Yes.
Okay, I will write it down. That's what I understand. If a feature, any feature,
Yep, that's exactly how it works today with the last change. So if it's there, you can't do anything with it. Yep. As a other. Yep.
Well, if you could not, if it's there and you don't, and you can't enable it.
Well, if it's not there, you can't enable anything, right? That feature doesn't exist. But if it's there, same time, you can't disable it. You can disable other features.
I insist on the any. Features is a feature.
Right. But if it doesn't exist, there's nothing for you to enable or to disable, right? So we agree that if it's not there, you can't enable it, right? So from that sense, if it's there, you shouldn't be able to disable it, right?
But
to equal the same effect.
If I can execute a recipe, I can enable a feature.
If you have access to the recipes, yeah.
Yeah, so if I can enable features through recipe, then for me, I can enable it, I can disable it. I'm not just talking about using the features feature, because yeah, that's the chicken and egg. But if I can execute a recipe to disable something, like the features feature, or to enable something, then I should be able to disable it. So this thing about feature module okay, so it's not, you should not have some code that says somewhere, it's the feature module, so let's not do that. It's any module, so let's not do that. Or it's the feature module, so let's do that. No, it's the any module, so let's do that. That's what I'm saying. So because recipes will let you enable anything, any module, not just the feature module. So if you intended to make a change that says, oh, this is a features module, let's not do that, or whatever, I don't think that's a good idea.
So hold on, are you saying to let them disable it accidentally if they want to?
Accidentally. To have the button, yes. To disable it, like any other thing. Not just because it's a feature module. If we have something in our tree that allows us to say any module can't be disabled, any like X, Y, Z, not all, any, then feature is the same. If I can disable a recipe, like if I can enable feature, I can disable feature. If I can enable recipe, I can disable recipe. If I can enable sitemap, I can disable sitemap. If I can't enable sitemap, I can't disable sitemap. If any feature, sitemap, if sitemap can't be enabled by a tenant, sitemap should not be, well, the tenant should not be able to disable sitemap either.
In that case, I think I just need to undo the last change and we're back to where it was.
Because if you have the recipe module and the admin of the tenant can do anything, then they can enable the feature. If they can enable the feature, then they should be able to disable it. They were able to enable it. So why can't they disable it? The same thing like if you create a content item, why aren't you able to delete the content item? You made the decision to create it. you are God over the content item. So you are God over its deletion also. You can delete it. Imagine a feature anywhere that you can say, yes, I want that. And then you're like, oh no, you can't disable it now. Someone else can, but you can't anymore. I'm like, I decided to do it. Like, I decided to stop doing it. And if one day we have a feature, maybe we have it, that says, you can't enable this feature. And I think we have that. Like, we have some settings that says, you can't enable sitemap. It's not part of your thing. And if it's enabled by some other magic code, like the default tenant, then we assume that, no, you can't disable it because you can't even enable it. So no, you can't disable it. Only super god, super tenant can do that. If you have it, good for you, but you can't disable it. Because we made a setting to say, no, you can't do that. And if it's not sitemap, but feature module, that works too. Like only the super tenant can enable feature for you, so you can't disable it. If you really don't want it, ask them to remove it, to disable it. That would work. Are we good?
Thank you.
Thank you. So many things. Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you on Thursday.